I'd like to make you aware that we also are recording this session tonight, and that's just a courtesy just to let you know. And I guess what I really want to do, I look around the room and there are so many new faces, and I'd really just like to tell you a little bit about Smart Precinct and what we do here. So we support, oh, gee whiz, I'll leave something out, so I'm not going to go off script too much. We support North Queensland founders, entrepreneurs and businesses of all sizes and shapes. We create opportunities for collaboration, learning and growth through a range of events, accelerator programs, mentoring and business advisory. And you may see through our social channels that we've been very busy of late. Our mission is to create a vibrant ecosystem of high growth businesses that are right here and globally competitive and right here in North Queensland. And we do that through linking you with subject matter experts, mentors, business advisory services, and some amazing programs. Since July last year, we are really proud to say that over 106 local businesses have received one-on-one mentoring through the Smart Precinct. 27 new businesses have graduated through our Startup On-Ramp course, with another 10 currently about to graduate in November. 10 businesses have graduated our I Activate Social Enterprise Accelerator, and we have hosted over 50 events, educational events and network events right here in this space, and we often flip it overnight to service different groups. We also have serviced over 1,000 guests at our events. We've assisted over 30 businesses just recently in successfully receiving grants. And of those founders that we have supported, 54% of those were women, something that we're super proud of. As a not-for-profit organisation and a startup ourselves, we can really do this because of the support we receive through Advance Queensland and Townsville City Council. And no matter what stage you are in business right now, I encourage you to speak to one of our SPNQ team members or myself. Check out our website, our socials, and really connect with resources that are available to you. And we can talk underwater, so we would absolutely love to tell you about them. The lovely team here at SPNQ have organised a little flyer for you, and we'd really encourage you to take that and find out what information is available. So the last thing I would really love to say is this event is really close to my heart, but also I want to thank not only Jen, which is a bit early, at the Advisory Board Centre, but the Townsville Business Women's Circle for collaborating on this event. So this is something that we're really opening the voice and supporting the women and also the amazing men. Thank you for coming that are in the room. And that's enough for me. I just want to welcome Jan now. A little bit of an introduction. As a founding member and certified chair of the Advisory Board Centre, Jan is a proud advocate for women in business and on boards. She leads the Female Founders Advisory Board program, delivered by the Advisory Board Centre and Advance Queensland. And please join with me in welcoming Jan here, all the way from Brisbane. Thank you. Hello.
I'll have it here, thank you. It's funny to say all the way from Brisbane, but I almost didn't get here because when we were pulling this event together, we had the little flare up of COVID, and Cassandra and I were going, oh no, is this not going to happen? What's this? But I made it, and thank you. I think the last time that I was in Townsville, I was actually facilitating a program for Queensland Government about advancing women on boards. And I had Bernice in that program, and Bernice, you've gone on to do some really wonderful things. So it's great to be able to see that and be here. If you don't mind just advancing the slides for me. We've overcome our first technical hurdle, which is the clicker's not working. So please work with us. Female entrepreneurship is something that's really important to me, and I have the opportunity both at the Advisory Board Centre and in my own experience to be a founder, a co-founder. Some of those ventures successful, some of those ventures not so successful, and have the opportunity to work with some really amazing women in business. And when we look back at the statistics about what's actually happening in female entrepreneurship, it quite frankly blew my mind when you look at it. Since 1991, female-founded businesses have increased by 80%, right? And in the decades of 2019, 2/3 of new businesses were female-owned. It's pretty amazing, right? Now, some of that is by the great work that we're doing to empower women to be able to make their own choices. Some of that is some of the economic pressures that we know about the challenges of women in business. And so some people are almost taking that step into employment because they need that flexibility that's happening. Regardless of what the choice is, it's pretty clear that the future of business is predominantly female at the moment. And we need to make sure that we have strategies in place to support those businesses. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. What I get really interested in is about scaling businesses. There are a lot of support mechanisms out there to help us in the startup phase, so incubators and accelerators and mentors and support networks. But then what happens next? And if we look at that scale-up phase and why that's so incredibly important, I just want to break that down, because sometimes we hear these terms like a scaling business and we go, but what does that actually mean? What does it mean to scale a business, and what is scale? So really scaling a business, you can look at it as a financial metric. So it's about growing or expanding that business. But there's also another definition for it, and it's about reaching full potential. And full potential can be different for different businesses. It's not always about financial growth. And bigger is not always necessarily better, right? But when we look at the impacts of scale and why that matters, scaling businesses, so those businesses that are experiencing high growth, so generally that's 20% growth year on year, they actually drive employment. So scaling businesses are responsible for 46% of employment growth. This is just looking at Australia alone, right? So we often hear small businesses being the engine room of our economy. It's actually the scaling small businesses that are the engine room of our economy. They're the ones that are driving employment. And they're actually what's driving sales growth as well, right? So sales growth, that means more money's in the market, more people are being paid, more things are being bought, more taxes being paid in that area. So government likes scaling businesses. But I think the other thing is it's about founder ambition. And so what I'm really passionate about is whatever you're doing in business, if you've got a dream and you've got an ambition and you've got a goal, whatever that is and whatever those metrics are that drive it, what do we need to do to help you get there? What are those things we need to help you support your scale? So I'm really pleased to see that there's some men in the room, right, in here, because this isn't a women's issue. This isn't secret women's business. Scaling women's businesses and supporting women in business and ultimately on boards, it's not a women's issue. It's absolutely an economic imperative. The number of businesses that are coming into the market are female owned, and we know that growing businesses to be able to support their outcomes that they want to do. I'll just tell a quick little aside. When we had an initiative launched about advancing women on boards and there was a reception at Parliament House, we were allowed to invite guests, but you had to get the guests vetted because it was going to the government event. So we put forward our guest list and we could have 15 people there, and we showed up at this event and it was all women in the room, except for the guests that we invited, because we had 5 men that were part of our program about advancing women on boards, and they were the only men in the room. And I was actually really shocked by that, because I think that's a problem if we have this as like a secondary sort of system, or we create a reverse sort of exclusion in these. So again, I do want to acknowledge the men that showed up, even if you had to be here. With that one. Thanks, Susan. So one of the things that we did at the Advisory Board Center is we've got an insight into scaling businesses. And then when we started work specifically around supporting female entrepreneurs, we started to notice some things first anecdotally, and then we backed it up with research and the data. Because what we noticed is that what was happening when we look at the, I'll call it the business sector, which are both male-owned or male and female-owned businesses, what was happening in the business sector was markedly different than what was happening to female-owned enterprises. And I'll just break that down a little bit. It's what we call the Great Divide. What we found is in those scale-up businesses in the business sector, around 17% of the research cohort were under $1 million in annual revenue. But then when we looked at the female-owned businesses, 65% of those businesses, their annual revenues were under $500,000. That's a big difference, right? It's a big difference. 75% of the business sector identified growth as an opportunity in the next 18 months. 91% of those female-led businesses were going for growth, right? So the appetite is there to grow. We want to grow. But what we noticed is that they were staying smaller longer. Growth was taking longer to be able to be achieved. And we thought, why is that? What's actually happening there? And one of the other things that we found from the research was around the support and advice that people seek. And I'll break that down a little bit more in just a moment. But in the business sector, 70% of those businesses would seek out very specialized advisors to support them on their growth journey. Whereas in the female founder cohort, 57% sat in that generalist market. They might just sit with like their accountant, right, for their support mechanism, or they might maybe have a solicitor as a general business solicitor or a general business coach to help them in their efforts. So what are those barriers to scale that we identified in the research? We looked at not just what people were doing. We said, what have you done? What are you planning to do in the future around growing your business? And the respondents range from businesses that were pre-revenue all the way through to female-led businesses that were over $50 million in revenue, right? So we know that some businesses are breaking through those barriers, and we were really curious to see what was different, what was happening for those ones that were able to break through. And really the barriers to scale kind of fall into four main categories. And I'll be sharing this research information. The Smart Precinct team will be sharing this. If you want to dig into this detail a little bit more, you can. The first thing we saw was around the delegation threshold. And that's about when, as a business owner, you begin to leverage other people's time, right, in the business. They may be as employees, they may be as contractors, subcontractors in the business. So when do you start to delegate to grow? And that's a real issue for female-led businesses, or what came through in the data. The second one was around business investment literacy. What I know from talking to female founders is they know where every dollar's going. They are all across cash flow. They understand their budgets. They have got financial literacy. Where the gap is about how do I actually start to leverage money to grow my business? How do I fund growth? And this really, really stood out when we start talking about the issues around capital that goes to female-led businesses, and the ways that female-led businesses are accessing funding to grow their business, right? What we know is that many start out, and it's around something like 78% had an intention to use excess funds or capital, or external capital, I should say, to grow their business, but only around sort of 12% were actually doing that at some point, right? And so there's a real gap there about how do I do that? How do I make that happen? How do I position that case? So it's different to just financial literacy. It's around business investment literacy. The other one was about who's got your back. And what we found is that when we looked at the female-led businesses that were under that $500,000 threshold and compared them to the female-led businesses that were over that $500,000 threshold, which is kind of like the new glass ceiling for female-led businesses, there was a distinct difference in who they accessed for support and how they access support. And it's that understanding of who supports you as an individual versus who supports you as a founder. And we find that women tend to socialize their support more than the general business cohort, or more than those female founders that break through to that next stage. So what does that look like, right? It's when we go to social events for women in business, those are very important because it can be very lonely, right? Being in business on your own, and we need those really great networks. It's the difference between networking and being networked. Who do I actually go to for help when I need it? Do I just ask Cassandra for some help because you're there and you're my friend and you might know something about it? Or do I actually go to someone with the skill and experience I need to drive those questions and give me the answers? So it's a very nuanced difference. And we see that female founders under $500,000 tend to get a lot of their support from things like social networking groups, social media networking groups, that type of thing. That's a good thing that you can access that support, but you may not be getting the right advice or the right support or the qualified support. So just keep that in mind. We need people that support us as individuals in business, but we also need people that actually drive our skills and experience as founders, because it's very different. The last one is the execution gap. How do you actually make it happen, right? And that's the tricky part. There's an intention to grow or an intention for things to happen in business, but how do you actually make that happen? So it's closing that gap between knowing and doing, and often having those right resources to make it happen. Time and again, we do hear female founders in that real crunch phase saying, I know what I need to do, but I might lack the funds or the knowledge or the time, the resources to make it happen. How do I actually execute on that? Thanks.
It's coming.
What we know is this isn't a job of any one person. We actually need the whole founder ecosystem, and we use this word ecosystems quite a lot about it, but this is not an issue that any one entity holds to solve. We actually need everyone working together to significantly shift the trajectory of female-led businesses. So we need funders and investors coming to the party, and you'll hear a lot of information in the news about the relatively small amount of capital that actually goes to female-led businesses. But that also includes things like your banks, just your traditional markets to be able to access funds. They need to understand the dynamics of female-led businesses. Business groups and accelerators. So the Townsville Business Women's Group, there's fantastic ones, but we need to make sure that we're all pushing in the same direction, right? That we all put our shoulders behind this to move things forward. We need to make sure that professional service providers actually understand more about the nuanced issues that affect women in business and ways that they can overcome that. Your personal supporters, we absolutely need our personal support networks to be able to make this happen, right? So we need to make sure that we have really robust personal support networks sitting behind female founders. Advisors and directors, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more on the panel tonight about women on boards and the role that boards can play and advisors can play in supporting female-led businesses. And government. Government absolutely has a role to play. I'm really proud to say that in Queensland, about 4 years ago, Queensland government, and specifically within Advanced Queensland, they very much wanted to address this issue and really wanted to put the backing behind female founders in a way that wasn't just the lip service. It wasn't just a policy thing, right? It wasn't just a vote grab. The program that we facilitate for female founders has been in place for 3 years. That's really unusual in a lot of government funded programs for there to be multi-year funding. But they did that because they wanted to make sure that if you weren't ready yet, that next year you had a chance to come, or next year you had a chance to come into that program, right? So I think that government absolutely has a role to play, and the federal government is doing work in this area as well. Thank you. So I just want to shift the conversation a little bit to about where we sit in the conversation about women on boards. And I'll use some data that comes from AICD, so the Australian Institute of Company Directors, where they look at ASX listed boards. And one of the reasons why we use that as a bit of a benchmark is because it's public data, right? They have to report on this information. What it doesn't give us an insight to is what's actually happening in the private business sector, right? Because private business boards, unless they're over a certain size, generally don't have to report on gender balances. So there's a little bit of an unknown about really how much advancement are we making. But if we look at the all ordinaries, we're sitting at about 28.1% of representation on women on boards. Many of you would have heard there's this, target 30%, 30%. We've got to get to 30% representation. Then so what? What happens next? What do we do? So it's fantastic that we're making inroads for that, but what does that mean next? When you break that down, I think this is a really interesting number because it's actually showing the this isn't just a one-off shift, that we actually have momentum in the market. About 44.6% of the new appointments were women on those boards, right? And so that's where that shift is coming. But there's still 77% of the 77 boards in the all ordinaries that have no women on there, right? And I think the main issue that I have around that is it's actually not representative of the market. And I can guarantee you that those 77 businesses don't sell exclusively to men, right? And their stakeholders are not exclusively men. So if your board is not representative of your market, you would have to question how they're going to remain relevant, right? How are they actually going to stay in touch with the market about what people want, need, and value if they're not represented at that board level? In the advisory board space, advisory boards are not legislated or regulated, so we don't have that same data. But what we do know is within our professional cohort of advisors, we sit around 30% of our professional members are women, but we're also seeing a market shift where many of them are coming in and they're looking to chair advisory boards. So they're taking specific professional development qualifications to be able to fulfill that role. So when we talk about women on boards, I've got really two kind of key, I guess, messages that I'd like for you to consider. And I'd like for all of us to maybe think about how we can advance this conversation. I think the key one is we need to move this conversation beyond just representation. It's no longer just about a number of women on boards, because I can't actually say to you that if we hit 30% or if we hit a majority of women on a particular board, that it's going to be better or worse, right? What I really want to focus on is what is that contribution, get us out of this tokenistic viewpoint of I have a woman on a board, so I've ticked a box and therefore we don't need to do anything else. Let's make sure that when we have people in these positions, we create opportunities for them to meaningfully contribute, right? Anecdotally, I hear a lot of frustration from women who do have board positions, but they don't have a voice at that board table, or they don't feel like they're as included in that. They feel like it's a box ticking exercise as opposed to actually a meaningful opportunity to contribute. And I think that goes beyond just female representation. That actually includes that whole diversity conversation. We need diversity of gender, we need diversity of race and ethnicity, and we also need diversity of skill sets, right, and backgrounds on board. So we need to focus now. It's not just about representation, it's actually that we have opportunities for meaningful contribution from a diverse set. And I also want to focus on this topic of collaboration, not polarization, right? So when we make this conversation about either advancing women in business or advancing women on boards as a better than conversation. So that's like saying a board with women is better than a board with just men. We immediately polarize the debate, right? It's about saying, I'm going to do a better job than you purely because of my gender. And that business is going to be better off having me on there purely because of my gender. And I think that that's a really dangerous conversation for us to be able to have, because it automatically puts us at loggerheads with many of the men who are advocates and supporters of women in business and women on boards. There's a really interesting, and there's different studies, and the beauty of research is you can sort of, if you hunt long enough, you can find something to support your own viewpoint. But this particular bit of research actually came out of the Wharton Business School in the US, and they looked over a long period of time at the performance of businesses that had women on boards compared to businesses that did not have female representation on boards. And what they actually found, and I was really surprised by this, is they said it was no better, but it was also no worse, right? So having a board with women was not necessarily better for financial metrics, but having a board with women didn't make the business perform worse, right? So what we need to focus on is that having women on boards, it may not be better than, but I guarantee you it will be different. It will be a different experience, and organizations need to carefully consider if that's something that they value, right? Do they value that diversity of experience? Do they value that representation of their stakeholder groups? Do they value those opportunities for their own, sisters and mothers and daughters? If they do, then this conversation we won't have to be having in a few years' time. It will just actually be the goal of inclusion, which is equality. We have equal opportunity to be able to be represented and equal opportunity to be able to be on boards. Right on time with that. Have you texted Jana?
She's on.
She's on. Excellent. So what we're going to do now, sometimes I know this can be a little bit like standing in front of a fire hose, a lot of information thrown at you. What we want to do is we want to open up this conversation. We're very lucky today to be joined by Dr. Jana Matthews. And I'll just give a little bit of an introduction to Jana while we're bringing her up onto the screen there. Hello, Jana.
Lovely to hear you, Jan. Thank you.
Excellent. I'll just want to share with you a little bit about Jana's background. So Dr. Jana Matthews is a professor. She's the ANZ chair of the Business Growth Centre and director of the Australian Centre for Business Growth at the University of South Australia. She served on 7 boards herself, and she's founded 5 companies of her own in the US. She currently chairs the selection committee for the Boosting Female Founders Initiative, which is an Australian government program, which is valued at 60 million over 5 years, specifically to support female founders. And we get this great opportunity for me to pick Jana's brain a little bit. And so Jana, I have my first question for you. Our audience today includes a diverse mix of business owners. We've got executives in the group, we've got advisors, and we've got women who are directors. You've got deep experience in all of these roles, so I think it gives you a unique insight. Can you share a little bit about your professional journey and what led you to pursue the study of innovation and entrepreneurship?
So I could start by saying I think I'm an English major gone bad, who grew up with a dad who had a small business, whose mother did the books. And I would go with my dad on the summer vacations as he went to visit his customers, and he would talk about customer service, understanding what they needed and wanted. And as I look back, an amazing experience of what you need to look for when you're in business, which is understanding who needs and wants what you have and what problem you're actually solving. So I went to a university, went to junior year abroad in London, went to Yale, went to Harvard, I have a doctorate in management and planning, did some work in Arthur D. Little technology consulting firm, and then was recruited to a National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, where we were trying to figure out how to help universities be better managed. That's always a trick. I did the first subsidiary of that group where we began doing technology-based economic development and worked with a lot of communities to understand what's required to support entrepreneurs and actually generate new ideas that could be turned into businesses. After they started another subsidiary, which drained off the cash, and that CEO took a computer and put it through baggage handling just to see what happened, and he didn't get fired. I quit. I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to start my own company because I'm not working with people who don't understand how hard it is to grow and with somebody who's draining off resources who clearly doesn't understand either. So started the first company, and that went extremely well. And then I got breast cancer, and that wasn't so good. But as I was coming out of breast cancer, I had an opportunity to work at the Kauffman Foundation Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership. They were just creating that. Mr. Kauffman had left $1.4 billion US, and we were tasked with seeing how we could accelerate entrepreneurship in America and how we could actually help people start and grow companies. So I had a chance to design the programs that had to do with venture capital, how to teach people to be venture capitalists, what's involved with angel education, tech transfer from universities. And then because they'd failed several times in trying to figure out what do you need to do to help companies grow, I got the short straw or the best straw in the world. And so I had a chance, I had all the money that I needed to experiment. I mean, think of this as a situation where it's a tabula rasa. Money is not the issue. The issue is, what do people need and want? And what do they value in order to be able to understand how to grow? And so we created tools and experimented with different modalities of teaching. Again, this was wonderful. And then my husband had some heart problems, and we moved back to Boulder, Colorado. And in quick succession, I wrote 3 books around marketing, management of growth. And New Zealand asked me to come down and help them figure out how to help their companies grow. They'd had a lot of failures as they were trying to break into the market in the US. And so while I was there, some folks said, would you come to Australia and do some programs for us? And I did. And that was great. And then when Chuck was not doing well and after he died, some of the Australians came to visit me and said, you need to come down. We need a Techstars-like program. And I said, well, Techstars doesn't know you, doesn't know where Adelaide is. And they said, but you know them and you know where Adelaide is and you need a break. And so I came for 6 months and I've been here for 7.5 years. I came to direct the Techstars-like program. And now I have transitioned into directing the center inside the university, find myself with this unusual title called professor, which I actually had never aspired to. What I really am interested in is helping people understand and learn what they need to do to grow. We do have an amazing database of companies that we've tracked since we opened our doors. So we have 1,250 companies who've gone through our programs, our clinics, and over 250 who've gone through the intensive growth programs. And every year we go back and collect data and have them update where they are in revenue, profitability, jobs, exports, how they've changed their leadership and what they're doing. So it's really, I think I have the luckiest person in the world. I have the best job you could possibly have, where you are actually helping people achieve their goal, understanding what they need to do and learn and change in order to be able to grow their companies. So that's my quick little journey.
Fortunate. We're so fortunate, Jana, to have your experience, not just in the room tonight, but in the country for us. So when you look at the opportunities specifically around female founders and having that lens that you do, being part of the Boosting Female Founders Initiative, what excites you about the future of female entrepreneurship?
Well, I guess one of the things that excites me is that there's simply now attention. There is attention to the issue. There are $60 million that we could use to help women actually boost their companies. Now, getting the word out, which is what does boost mean? And I was really so heartened by what you were saying, Jan, which is, it's not, I have an idea, and if you give me the money, I'll quit my job. It's not, I'm working on this research project, and if you give me more money, I'll do more research and do another project. It's actually having something that you've taken and tested, and the market is ready, and you're ready now to go. And so we just finished selecting last week. We had over 2,500 people apply in the expressions of interest this year. And then we somehow got that down through a process that was really difficult to maybe 100 and some, 150, 60, whatever. And then there'll be a smaller number that actually get funded, not because they're not great companies, but because we just don't have enough funds to do that. So at least there's recognition that women actually need to have a chance to have equal treatment, right? And secondly, that there are programs like BFFI, and that there's more attention now to actually creating opportunities for women with other women, with men, all together, the respect for each other in terms of growing. And that there's a whole generation of men who are more supportive of women now. In some ways, some of the guys have come and they said, well, I want my daughter to have an opportunity. So that's been good. They'd like to open up and have their daughters be respected as equals. And then I think little girls are now seeing more high achieving women as mothers or friends of their mothers. And so they have role models that some of us didn't have when we were younger. Somewhere before we finish, Jan, I've got about 5 things that I want to also kind of include in terms of things that I think have added or do add to women being successful, but somewhere along the line to add that.
Yeah, that's excellent. What a wonderful problem to have, for that to be such an incredibly competitive process and such a huge groundswell of opportunities coming through that program of women that are interested and ready for that. I think it's that. But before we get to those 5 things, Jana, I'd just actually like to ask you another question to go back to what you were saying about the unique problem that you had where money wasn't the issue in the problem you were trying to solve. In our research, we actually found that money doesn't solve everything, right? So when you look at it for some female-founded businesses, they think that capital is the issue, but when you say, if I gave you $500,000, what would you do with it? They don't know. They don't know what they would do with that. And so that's where I think that business investment literacy piece comes in. What's been your experience around that? Because you're sitting on one side of being able to help facilitate funds to go to female-founded businesses, but you also have to evaluate them very, very carefully to make sure they know how to use that capital to grow their business.
Well, that's right, because I think of us as investors. We are investing the money of the people of Australia in a small number of companies that we think will return on that investment. Be jobs, be additional taxes, it'll be role models of women, be successful businesses. We have lots more canvas, up our sleeve if we get a chance to do that. So what we're looking for and what we're searching for is not just the product. I think all of Australians are mesmerized by the product. They seem to think that's the most important thing. It's not the product. Venture capitalists know that it's the people, the team that are going to take whatever that product is forward. You want an A team and an A idea, but you'll actually take a B idea if you have an A team because you know they can make it into an A idea. What you don't want is a B team and an A idea or a B team and a B idea. So we're betting on the person, we're betting on the horse and then the jockey, so to speak. So we're looking at what's the background, looking at what's the team that's in place, looking at what's their experience, and what's their approach to business and what have they done and how do they describe it. And so there's a combination of a pitch deck and the business plan as well as the application, their financials. And I'm sorry to say that we don't have quite as good a luck as you've had if all the women knowing where their panties are going, because we are finding that financial acumen, it's not just a woman thing. I have a lot of guys who come to the program that do not understand that either. So that's financial, and that's going to be one of the things I say in my words here, final thoughts. So the person, the idea, their understanding of what they're going to tap into in terms of other partners or organizations that'll help spread the word. If they're going to be marketing, then are there marketing partners? If they're into development or if they're into exporting, who will those be? So we're looking at that. We're actually looking at, of course, one would assume that they're applying because there have been barriers to they're getting funding anyway. So I don't think we have to ask that question anymore. We know there have been barriers, but that has been heretofore one of the, and we were looking that they really do need the money. If they're all cashed out and they have several $1 million that they've already used of their own money and they're going to fund the rest of the co-match with their own money, well, maybe some people who don't have that much money available, if it's one against one, maybe we'll choose the person that really does need our money to go forward. So those are hard choices to make, but those are things that we've been looking at. The idea, the person, their financial acumen, their marketing plan, their business plan, and then who else that they see as the extensions of them to help them be successful.
I'd really like to drive one of those points home for the people in the room and online that you highlighted, Jana, which is you're all here tonight investing in yourself. You're not just investing in your product. Consider this as professional development. You're investing in yourself. And as Jana highlighted, the founder and their skill set and their ability to execute is just as important, if not more, than just the product. So I really do applaud the time that you're taking tonight to come and listen and engage with programs like this. Jana, if you would just share those 5 tips with us, please.
Well, I have 2 sets of 5s. Can I do them both?
Absolutely. I've got 2 hands and I'm one.
A cheeky girl, right? Okay. So I did one, which I was thinking that these are kind of things that you said, what led to my success? My mother said when I was a child that the very things that made me so maddening were the things that she thought had led to my success. So one was I did never take no for an answer. I wanted to know why it was no. Was it the time of day? Was it something I had done before? Did I learn not to ask for things at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 7 o'clock at night, but ask in the morning? I wanted to know why. And that's part of the curiosity as well. I took my Mickey Mouse watch apart because I wanted to know what went on. Unfortunately, I wasn't smart enough to actually figure out how to get it back together again. So I'm obviously not an engineer, but that's curiosity and the unwillingness to take no. And I think that resilience, that bounce back as a woman, because you will hear no, and people kind of tend to think no, you don't know your financials or whatever. They'll automatically think no before they'll think yes. Okay, second was, I think of myself as a detective. I'm trying to figure out what does someone really need and want and value. So it's like detective work. And then do we have that to offer them? Because if we don't, then it's game over. Let's stop. Let's not try selling or maybe even a conversation anymore. And so when one of the ministers in Queensland asked, do you have programs for sole proprietors? And we really want to give people a kind of a boost and help them, try to keep themselves employed. I said, actually, we don't have any programs for someone like that. Our programs are focused on people who actually have a company, have a product, have revenue, and want to grow. And that's what we do, and we do really well. So you have to know what you do well and what you don't do, and then stay focused on the things that you do. Third, words matter. It's really important to be a good communicator to customers, to your own employees, to boards. Choose words carefully, understanding how to write, communicate, and present. Very important for women. I've coached so many women stopping saying, I know, you know, I mean, all that takes your power away. So really learn how to present, get your thoughts in order, and then present. Likewise, understand the numbers. That's just a different language. Numbers, financials, it's a different way of describing what's going on in your company. Being willing to take risks. I'm probably a bigger risk taker than a lot of people. Most people wouldn't have moved across the world, for what? After their husband died, sold their house, come over here, try something new. But it's just been a marvelous opportunity. And I looked at my crisscross of the world when I was in my younger professional years. I've been to Iran, I've been to Europe several times, I've been to Asia Pacific, global thought leader for SAP, down in New Zealand, lived in there. All of that required me to sort of take a risk, to get out of my comfort zone and go do those new things. But that's helped me grow and develop as a person. And finally, I really am focused on helping other people succeed. It's not about me. I'm the medium for whatever it is that I'm trying to teach people. And I really want to help them learn it, and I want to help them be successful in their own. So I think that focus on someone else, not just me, but to focus on someone else and helping them be successful has also been good. And I learned that from my mom.
Fantastic. What's the other 5?
So
I don't want her to stop.
Okay, so as a woman, wonderful little tale that another woman told me. She was in a group with men, a YO forum, and she said, one of the guys said to me, Sue, the only difference between you and me, you're as smart as I am, you've got as good a product as I do, you're a good a salesperson as I am. You know what the difference is? A 0. I think bigger than you do by a 0. And she was really startled. And I think we need to think about that. Because how big do you think? You're going to think of a $300,000, a $500,000 company. Well, why? Why do we think 500? Why not a $5 million company? It's a different set of skills that you have to learn. And yes, it's a bigger risk, but it's a bigger reward. And there are many kinds of rewards, not just financial, when you're growing and having a chance to encourage and develop other people to come along and create opportunities and solve customers' needs. It's pretty exciting. I was on the board, the National Board of Women Business Owners in the US, the Center for Women Business Owners. And we did a lot of research on the companies that women founded, as well as the women business owners themselves. And so I was really interested in the research that you've done, Jan, as well. We found that women were creating companies at the same, this is back in the 90s and early 2000s. Women were creating companies at about the same rate as men. Until they got to $1 million. And they were also growing about the same rate as men until they got to $1 million. And after that, the men just, scored ahead, and that got to the 5 million mark, the 20 million mark, the 50 million mark. Percentage of women got smaller and smaller and smaller. That was a puzzle to us. And so I think what we discovered was part of that is also related to the other responsibilities that women have. So women start their companies in their 20s and start or grow their companies in their 50s. This is in the US. This is my recollection of what we found. And then the ones that are in their 30s and 40s are busy with children, and they're, they have families. And my daughter has a company there, and she's just praying that it just stays sort of steady until the kids get out of high school and she can focus on it. So it's just a little company. She's actually keeping the cap on it. It's from my perspective. So the whole issue of parenting, which falls still primarily on the women, this is an issue. So the third issue is most people, and this isn't just women, this is men, do not know how to grow. They don't know what to do. They know how to think. They don't understand the relationships of things. They're just dealing with 1,000 things that are coming at them all the time. You know, and just to be able to understand how do you sort those out into a knowledge growth framework, and to be able to understand that companies go through stages of growth, and you've got to take on different roles at different stages, just like a parent. You know, you don't behave with your baby in arms the same way as when they get to be 7 and start to go to school, and you behave like a different parent there, and then you're behaving differently as they go into high school and rock and roll years and all that, and then as an adult. So different stages of company growth require different kinds of skills of the leader. They also don't understand the delegation, but men don't either. That's an eye-opener when they see the 5 levels. How do you manage people who aren't performing, and why it's important to get people performing as in doing the functional requirements of the job as well as their values that fit with the values. Both of those are critical for successful companies. I mentioned the whole issue of financial knowledge. I had one woman come to me and said, my dad's willing to let me take over the company, but he says, I need more financial knowledge. Where do I get that? And I said, you sit right down here, young lady, we'll have a conversation. But I also had a guy who had been through the program, and I think he was up to $90 million. And he had free fall down to $30 million and continuing to fall because he paid no attention to the financials. And his CFO was sort of moving money between companies, and suddenly the bottom fell out and wasn't a good story. So it's not just women, it's men as well who aren't paying attention. And then I say the final one is sort of like, you know, something's got to give. There's only so many hours in the day, and you just have so much energy. I couldn't possibly do what I do if I were married and had kids. There's no time left in the day. I mean, I work 60, 80 hours a week. I work over the weekend. I couldn't do that if I actually had people dependent on me in my family, right? So a friend of mine who was a mentor said, when I said, Sylvia, you have a business, you're a CEO, you have these amazing friends on the weekend, you have all these dinner parties. How do you do it all? And she said, my dear, she was from Boston, my dear, you too can do it all if you don't think you have to do it all. So I have a cleaner who comes in. I would have had a nanny. I would have other people who, you know, do the grocery shopping. Those are not things that are my unique abilities. Believe me, cooking, my idea of cooking is to have the meal be brought in from a local caterer or have the caterer come. Those are Jana's dinner parties. So figure out how you're going to spend the time. You only have 24 hours a day. You don't ever get yesterday back again. So have great business, have a great partner, staff, your partner at home. If you're going to try to do both, it's going to be hard. And I remember my mom saying to me, life is a series of trade-offs. You trade off one set of problems for another set of problems you think are more manageable, but you never reach nirvana.
Jana, thank you so much. Clearly you do work all the time because you've given your time to us tonight. So thank you so much, and really looking forward to continuing this conversation, and really, really value the way that you've taken some very complex issues and made them very accessible for all of us in the room. So thank you.
Thank you, my pleasure. And I hope you have a great evening. Thanks very much.
I hope that wherever you're at in your business journey, you can take something away from that. We're quite likely to be able to tap into that depth of experience. And now I'd like to shift us back into this room and tap into some of the experience that we have with our panel. So if I can invite our panel up to the stage, and I'll just do some introductions. We're very lucky tonight to be joined by Kathy Wilson, who's the COO and co-founder at Jezi, the remote worker management solution. We've got Verena Kuhn, the general manager of Townsville Business Development Center, and an experienced governance professional. Therese Smith, we've got managing director of the Gleason Group, and you're formerly the chair of the Queensland Fire WNBL basketball team and Stadiums Queensland director. And the lovely Miranda Mears as well, our local head of Smart Precinct, also a former business owner and a governance professional as well. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. This is really an opportunity. We've got some diversity and background here to really dive in and open this conversation up. And we'll talk to the panel for a little bit, and then I want to open it up to some Q&A in the room. So please be thinking of some questions that you might have. Kathy, if I can start with you. We were talking before about the what that business journey looks like for female founders. You've been a vital part of the startup and now that scale up phase at Jezi. Can you share what that experience has been like for you, and share with us a little bit about what Jezi actually does?
Yeah, I was going to say, probably best to.
I might share this one with you.
Let's do a switch. It's on, but this one's
my voice is
louder.
pretty loud.
Yeah. That's for online.
It's for the
Oh,
online.
okay.
Yeah.
So Jezi started in and was launched in 2014 in Mount Louisa, our home. We support organisations manage the safety of where people are moving around, so remote and isolated workers. We've got 35,000 users across the world, primarily here in Australia, but we have a presence over in Canada, USA, and also Europe, and also Africa as well. So I guess, yeah, it was a very interesting question. What has been my experience? I started with Jezi, and most of you know Joe Houlihan, who's also my husband as of April, but my co-founder. And he asked me to come and do a business plan for him. And I thought, oh, well, this is, 3 months. I know nothing about technology whatsoever. And here I am 7.5 years later. And it's been, some parts have been exceptionally exciting. So when we launched in 2014, and that was, in Bowen, September of that year, we actually onboarded 250 users of Rio Tinto over in Western Australia. I hadn't even met my main contact. So I literally got Rio Tinto over the line in bare feet, which is an interesting story. But 250 users, and we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. How easy was this? And we had Wally Parsons, and we had all these big brands that were after us. And then in 2015, the GFC hit, and the whole resource sector died. So for the next 3 years, and then we were, asked to, and we've gone through investment and a whole bunch of other things with that, we were asked to move to Brisbane. And for me, Townsville had been my home. I'd raised my children here, my career in terms of my network, my safety net, and then all of a sudden I had to move to Brisbane. And at the time, Joe also had a daughter that he was still needing to look after here in Townsville. So for the next 3 years, we actually had a fly-in, fly-out relationship. He came to Brisbane and he came back to Townsville. And so we continued to build the business, and we needed to be right where our customers were, because if you've ever been on a flight from Brisbane or Townsville to Perth, it's like a whole day's travel, and it can be quite exhausting. So we needed to do that for the business and be in front of our customers. But it was also a really interesting time that we were going through some challenges with capital. We had an interesting shareholder that, we weren't profitable. We had 6 employees at the time, and his overinflation of what he thought his value was and expected from leaving the business. But nobody wants to invest when you've got a bad shareholder. So for 3 years, we had to dig absolutely deep. There were times where we didn't know how we were going to pay our staff, let alone ourselves. But we came through that, and it really is testament to, I guess, not only our business relationship in terms of Joe and I's relationship, but also our personal relationship, and that male-female yin and yang of being able to be resilient. When I was really down, he was really up, and when vice versa. So we came out of that, and we were able to raise another round of funding, which meant that we were able to increase our staff again, which took us on another trajectory of our own growth. And then through that, it enabled us last year to really position ourselves for the large capital raise Series A, which was 4.5 million that we were able to successfully achieve in October last year. So that also took us on another trajectory of lots of different learnings in due diligence, and this is hardcore due diligence, because we were now dealing with a really sophisticated investor out of New South Wales. So there was lots of other learnings that we needed to learn there. And then all of a sudden we've got a board, and so there's a whole bunch of other learnings that have come through. Now we're in that true scale up phase, and we've now grown our team from 8 to 22. And then, the interesting remote worker and COVID, and there's been a whole other, range of challenges to have to deal with. But then you come up and you have the excitement, like, 2 months ago where we got Chevron across the line. It's one of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world, right? And then yesterday we had Wally Parsons come across the line. So there is the ups and the downs and lots of different learnings. And I'm still on the trajectory of significant learnings, and I'm nearly 50. So yeah, that's my experience.
I think and thank you for sharing that, because I think it's so valuable. We often see especially around capital raising, we see the really glossy story of a 4.5 million capital raise, and some of us are sitting in our businesses thinking, how would I ever get there? What does that look like? Why does it seem so much easier for them? And it's hard, and it's messy, and it's bumpy, and it's exciting, and all of those things. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us, because we need to hear those stories behind it.
Can we ask questions?
If we can just maybe come back through and come back to this. I know. I get to go first. I'd just like to bring Therese into the conversation. I think your background is really dynamic, because you've had success in two industries that are not typically known for being very supportive of women, the IT industry and also sports. And I think that you've got this experience of really breaking through in that. So can you just share a little bit about how you've seen some shifting opportunities for women?
Sure, I'll do my best. I actually refer to my career as a checkered life, because I originally was a scientist, so a chemist, biochemist with no jobs around, fell into secondary school teaching, fell into construction industry, and fell into IT. So it's a bit of the story of my life. So I suppose growing up, I grew up as the youngest daughter of an entrepreneur, and who actually was the founder of television in North Queensland, and was also on the offset the first satellites for Australia. So for me, there were no mountains that I thought we couldn't climb. It was a very positive experience from both parents. There was no television equipment in Australia, so you go to Japan and we're going to buy some television equipment, and that was just how it was done. So I suppose from my experience, I never have contemplated failure in anything that I've done. So and that was from that background as well. So also I was in sport, so I played volleyball and beach volleyball to a national level, and that's where my main love is there in sport. But obviously you fall into things during life. So the IT business came to me through a brother-in-law who was involved, who was an Israeli and had come over and settled in Australia. And of course, it was a tipping point in the early 90s, was the computer game was where you had to be. So I got convinced in 3 weeks, despite having a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, that I needed to open an IT business. So $5,000, and 3 weeks later, I opened what was called Roshtec back in those days, and worked at that for 23 years. It was a tipping point. It was a very quick growth industry back in the day. It's obviously changed considerably now. So within 3 to 4 years, we were turning over 6 million revenue and had 3 branches in North Queensland. So that's with the IT industry. I just figured that I can learn anything that I need to. So basketball practice, swimming practice, I had the computer magazines. I had never seen inside a computer to know what the parts were. So I thought I need to know a little bit more than the customers that I'm going to try and sell to. So that was very exciting, heady times. I didn't find too many obstacles in the IT industry. I certainly didn't find many females to employ at that stage. I've only ever had one female technician, networking technician, in the whole time of 23 years. But the lots of staff that went through, were very diverse. They probably all had degrees, but I had a geologist, I had a, chemist, I had a finance guy. They all did industry type courses, your Microsoft, your Cisco, all that kind of stuff. And that's how how they found their pathways and have been quite successful. The only thing that would happen is that if someone came into the business to talk to the manager, they wouldn't look at me. They would think that I was the receptionist. So, but that's okay. In the sporting area, I think I've always been encouraged by male counterparts. I've been very fortunate in that I went on to JCU Council for 8 years or something like that. I was encouraged by a male friend of mine that I should apply. I thought, oh, don't be ridiculous. But I thought, I'll have a go at this board thing. So I did that and served there for 8 years. Stadiums Queensland board positions. Obviously, I don't know if everyone remembers, but three years ago, the state government sacked the whole board of Stadiums Queensland. So we had a brand new board. Another friend, a male friend, said, why don't you apply? You've got a Masters of International Sporting Management. You know, no one else has got the qualifications. And I said, I don't think I'm political enough because it's a state government board. Not that I'm a political beast, but I don't think they knew what I was. So then, so I was lucky enough to get on that board, and our board of 7 had a female chair and 3 other females and three male members. So they were well and truly outnumbered on that board. It was a very respectful group and a really great experience on Stadiums Queensland.
Excellent. I want to come back a little bit later to that point of having advocates for us, right? People that can see opportunities for us and encourage us for opportunities. I'd like to explore that in just a moment. Miranda, I'd like to invite you into the conversation if we can. Your experience, not just as head of Smart Precinct, but your previous roles as a business owner, an executive, as a director, you really see that full spectrum of what it's like for women in business, from startups, scale-ups, all the way through. What shifts are you seeing in the market for women?
I think definitely the concept of that contribution as opposed to representation is definitely where I see some shifts in opportunities for women. The last thing I want to be on board is a diversity hire, and I actually was on a public board, and I won't announce which one it was, where I just raised some challenges I had around whether I thought that there was some good corporate governance occurring in the board, and whether the board perhaps actually really understood what their fiduciary responsibilities were, to be told, why don't you just be quiet, little girl, what's your problem? And it was an interesting one. He was boring anyway, so that's okay. What was challenging though for me was the fact that there was other women on the board that actually didn't speak up or something about that. But I think from where I'm sort of seeing things shift and where the opportunity for women is, we've got such great diverse skill sets, right? And that's where boards really need to be looking in terms of their diversity. So the Australian Institute of Company Directors, for example, have just specified that they believe that all of the ASX top 200 and perhaps, you know, every single board should have a representative with cybersecurity experience. If we look at the fact that, you know, cybersecurity attacks on Australia, both sovereign and small business, have actually grown 600% in the last 12 months alone, that's probably a good skill set to have on your board. So I think being able to understand where your diverse skill set is and be able to speak with a voice that says, this is the contribution I can make. What I'm seeing here at Smart Precinct from our startups, men and women, is that very same journey that I had when I first started one of my businesses, Securus Global. You don't know what you don't know. And I think that that's one of the real powerful opportunities for industry advisory boards for startups and founders, is to be able to draw upon in a very structured framework, bringing in that expertise that you need. So that's where I sort of see the opportunities for women, and I'll talk to some more opportunities that we've got for professional development going forward. For yourselves, in terms of your own development, I think that in every business that I've owned and started, a cleaning company, that didn't make much money. And I very, very early learned that that was not where my values or my passion was. A registered training organisation and a cybersecurity hacking company that floated on the stock exchange. So really, really, really random and different types of businesses, but the frameworks and the processes of managing business are all the same. I have been a graduate of the Institute of Company Directors, and it really makes me cringe to say for this long, but for about 17 years. And I took that at a time when there were no female founder grants, there were no opportunities for women to really explore those opportunities. And I forked out the $8,000 myself to do that, because I saw that the opportunities around that were really valuable. And it hasn't let me down. Having that good governance framework, a good comprehension about what is risk. And Jana spoke to about she's very risk tolerant, understanding from a board perspective and your own personal perspective where your risk appetite sits is a powerful catalyst for you to be able to take those opportunities. And also what I'm sort of seeing in our business advisory services and our businesses is the opportunities for women around being able to be systemized and being more effective and efficient as opposed to just trying to do it all yourself. So some of our businesses, the lovely Megan Colwell and Jane Arlett, have seen their businesses grow 300% in revenue in 3 months. And a lot of that has got to do with taking yourself out of the critical path. We talk about key person risk, and women are lousy at actually trying to do everything themselves and save a bit of money because they think that they can do it all themselves. And they probably can, but we don't all have the time to do it. So being able to take advantage of those opportunities like Smart Precinct and the Townsville Business Development Centre, Townsville Business Women's Circle, harness your tribe around you. And I think it's a really powerful opportunity for women. But definitely take your point as well, Jane, that we need to make sure that we're getting advice from the right people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No one else, if you're in business or if you want to get in business, no one understands that journey other than someone else that's been there and done that.
You highlighted a point that I think is really important to take away. Whatever stage of business you're at, governance shouldn't be seen as something that is like a big business concept. Governance as a term and as an understanding is really about just having great foundations around decision-making and quality decision-making in your business. So whatever size business you are, and if you're operating as a PTY LTD, you are a director in your business, you need to really have a good understanding of that and educate yourself around that and know when to scale that governance as your business grows, just like the Jezzy journey was, that your business grew into a different form of governance. Thank you for that, Marina. Marina, we had a lovely conversation before, and your background both as an advocate for small business in your current role, but your experience as a counselor and being on, I want to get these names right because government loves to give long titles to things, chaired the Economic Recovery Task Force and the Queensland Small Business Recovery Advisory Council. I mentioned before about supporting women in business on boards, really driving economic impact. I'd love to get your thoughts around why that's so important and the role that that government and industry can play.
I have very few thoughts on the role that government and industry can play at the moment. What was the first part of that question that you asked?
So around the importance of supporting women in business to be able to drive the economic impact.
I think that's been very well documented, and I think even the men in the room accept that when you have women around the table, they are a driver for economic impact. But what I would say is that with women around the table, you actually get different discussions and then you get different decisions. So that's what excites me. And that's where I think the intrinsic value can come from. It's not, and I think economic return if you have women at the table, but they're definitely better, deeper, wider discussions, and they're definitely better decisions that can be made.
Can you share a little bit about your experience in the boards that you've been on, and specifically around the advisory boards that you've been on, and what that's been like for you.
Yeah, great. There is a big difference between the advisory and if you actually are an ordinary board member. So the fiduciary responsibility is different.
Can you just explain what fiduciary responsibility is for everyone in the room?
Financial responsibility, so that as far as the advisory boards are concerned, you become a source of expertise, so a subject matter expert essentially. So I can kind of frame it as all care, no responsibility, but you are still responsible, and you also have your personal brand that you want to represent. But I really enjoy both as far as the different experience, because I have a lot of background in governance and finance. So I enjoy roles on boards, but equally I have enjoyed the advisory boards that I've been on, because you get a different kind of conversation. You don't have to be tracking, your audits, and you don't have to be all over your governance, and you don't have to be all over your clients, because other people are taking care of that. You come, or you get engaged by an organisation for your subject matter expertise, and then you can actually bounce off other people who are also there for their subject matter expertise. So they're actually quite interesting boards to become a part of as well. And I would encourage everybody, when you hear board, doesn't always mean the same thing. So if you're not already involved in a board and you're having a look at your opportunities, have a look at advisory boards as well.
That's excellent, thank you. I'd like to circle back to that concept of having advocates and people that it sometimes encourages out of our comfort zone and out of that space. Therese, you shared that you had and two men, interestingly enough, that said you should really have a look at this. Why was it not something that you were thinking of to look for yourself? Had it not just occurred to you, or was it a confidence thing of, I think I might want to do this, but you just hadn't taken that step?
I think it was a combination of a lot of things. When a friend rang me about the JCU Council, because I was obviously a graduate like many people are here, I was already involved with the Townsville Fire, and I'd been chair for like 6 years of that. But I'm very aware of organisations needing to turn over their leadership. I think politically, councils, everything needs to turn to be, to keep on the straight and narrow. So I was ready for another challenge, but I really wasn't looking. And also with the stadiums job, with that friend, he was very persistent. It's closing day to day. Have you sent your resume in? I said, no, I haven't. And he persisted and persisted. And so I do thank him, because it was a wonderful 3 years of experience. So I would say to people, probably sit down and smell the roses a bit more and have a think about your future. I think we're so wrapped up sometimes in the urgent versus the important, as you'd all be aware of. So those experiences are out there. We don't put ourselves forward enough for these positions. Other people believe in us more than we do, I think. So yeah, I would say to the younger people or the people looking for board positions, yeah, just look for opportunities. Something will come up, and have those conversations with people, and don't be hiding your skills away. Yeah.
Absolutely, great advice. Verena, you had something you wanted to share on
Yeah,
that as well?
I was just going to jump in there.
You grab it just so that people have.
Sorry, thank you. Because my offers came in a very similar way. It's like, what? That's weird. Okay, I'll have a think about that. But twice where offers have come my way, and one was actually for council, and the other one was actually with AFL to actually be the president of a football club. So it was the first time in the history of the league, first 60 years of our club, we've never had a female as president. So it's kind of game changing. And of course your ego goes, bam, yeah, I'll do that. Sure, no worries. But then reality kicked in, and I was a single parent, and we left an abusive marriage, and there were all of these layers because life was there. And I actually turned to my children, so speaking of advocates, where I said,
here's the opportunity, here's the phone call I've had, or here's the conversation, and here's the offer that's there at the moment. And both times they just both looked at me and said, you have to do this. Why would you not do this? And they were in a situation where they were going to be the ones that actually missed out on my time when I started to invest it in other places. But bringing them into the conversation and not just assuming that, you know, it was going to be a bad idea for all of us, because as soon as I had their support, I knew that I could do it all. So, yeah, I would encourage everyone to talk to your people around you and not just make the assumption that it's going to be one thing too many.
Just before we open it up to questions from the floor, I'd like to explore the concept of advocates for business. So, Kathy, at Jesse, you wouldn't have been able to bring on the types of customers that you brought on if you didn't have some really strong advocates for you in your business. What's that been like in building that kind of customer service and advocacy as a business owner?
I think that's also been a very interesting journey for us. A lot of the discussions about, you know, wrapping yourselves with people that have actually done this before. It's really challenging in, I guess, our type of business that there hasn't been a lot of people that actually done this before. And there's also a huge amount of pressure to be a unicorn. Huge amount of pressure. VCs want you to do 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. It's like, we've got 8 people, right? Like, and we haven't done this before. So we're learning a lot as well. So we've actually had some really interesting business advisors come along the way. And I guess where we're at now, and this is a philosophy that we did at least 3 years ago, is if we're going to bring an advisor into our business, have you done it before? And when have you done it? And how have you done it? So that there's a demonstrated experience before you start paying somebody and giving somebody money. Because a lot of people, and all respect to consultants who are in the room, and I've been one of those, is they kind of float around as, you know, they've got the expertise and not necessarily. So we've actually kind of, you know, fallen quite a lot, you know, got a lot of scars. But we've got some really good advocates around our business now, and they've come in all sorts of forms, whether it be formal, informal, and we definitely have a whole bunch of supporters. Like North Queensland has been a massive supporter base. There's been a significant supporter base out of the startup community, which that's primarily Joe's really driven those relationships wherever I've been in the business, head down, let's go. So even some of the things that you talked about around the loneliness, as a female, it's really difficult, particularly in tech, and you've got this global company and, you know, yeah, money's an issue, but oh my God, you're a global company and you've got all these fabulous customers. It's really difficult to talk to somebody about that. And, you know, I guess as I'm starting, I feel like I'm coming out because I've had a few of these different opportunities, because now, you know, there is some notoriety around where we're at. It's actually, I guess, my responsibility now to be able to have an openness and be able to share our experience, because it is really difficult and you need to be able to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to open it up to some questions from the group if we can. Cassandra, were you going to maybe run the microphone around? If we can just come back to here, you had a question.
I do.
Will you need this?
Hello, I had a question for you, primarily about the Series A raise, because I think that I'm a co-founder of an agri-tech startup company for Australia's first commercially licensed mobile abattoir. And we're at that point of growth, and to find either one individual who wants to put $5 million in, or a bunch of $500,000 of investment, or expending the time with no guaranteed return for a government grant, is how we've engaged the last 9 months of our professional development. And since COVID has hit, the wheels of the bureaucracy at state and federal levels have meant that grant applications, which were meant to be turned around in 6 to 12 weeks, are 9 months with, you will find out in due course. So any tips for a Series A raise?
I reckon that's a whole other Yeah, he wants to take that one. It's a really good question and it's a really complex answer. So I'm not going to give you probably the answer that you really want to hear because it is really challenging and it's based on relationships. Like the VC that invested the 4.5, they were floating around in 2014. So they've watched us along the way. So it didn't happen all, overnight. And they've watched, kind of our journey and our resilience and us overcome different significant challenges when we were hot potatoed around not being able to be attractive for investment. And it is, and I can solely say this, it's Mr. Houlihan. As you all know, he's one of the biggest networkers and the biggest relationship builder, and he has maintained that relationship, and that's how it came to be. But it also is about making sure that the investor that you actually want to attract is aligned to your business and really understands your business, your challenges, and where you want to go, and your values. Your values are aligned. But I can definitely give you a contact in the agribusiness. And she's female and she's based out of Rockhampton and she's very, very passionate about the whole space.
That's what I love about this. Do you have any other questions?
I was just going to talk a little bit about government grants. It's my specialty. What I would say is the people that you're dealing with when you're applying for these grants have the bucket of money that it's their job to actually assess and give away. The worst thing they can do to people is string them out like you've been strung out and not give you a no. Because if you had a no already, you would have gone for venture capital, straight up, you'd be looking for other investors, but you're in this limbo. And I've known people that have been 18 months in this limbo and it's always, oh, we've just got to have another meeting. And you need to drill down and basically say, look, if you're not interested, just give me a no. Give me a no, but they won't like that. But they do have processes, most of them, and timelines that they're supposed to meet. COVID is no excuse for a grant application not to be processed whatsoever. So I'm happy to talk with you about who you've applied to and things like that. And anyway, I do know some local people that are on the cusp of getting their matching funding for a, timber plastic composite manufacturing business. So, all that recycling stuff that everybody goes, oh, that's a great idea. They only needed $2.5 million. So I thought it was a no-brainer, but it's taken forever. Other sources of money, there's money out there if you want it. If you can pay the interest or capitalise the interest, there's money out there that people want to give away on a good business plan, right? It's very difficult with startups, of course, but there are sources of funds. What I'd say, a banker isn't a banker isn't a banker, all right? There are groups of disenfranchised bankers that have got 30 years experience each that are now in broker organisations that know how to present your material to the bank. They talk their language, they can get you a good deal, but most importantly, they get you talking to the right section in the bank. So you can be completely talking to someone who doesn't understand any part of your industry. But obviously with the agricultural stuff, you've probably got specialists, but then you need a commercial specialist to come in and evaluate your business. So that the agri guy is there to lend money rather on land and equipment. He's not there to evaluate a business plan. So you're probably talking to the wrong person, maybe inside as well.
When you're doing something disruptive,
Oh, absolutely.
they go, no one's ever done that before.
Where do you fit?
Yeah.
Sorry, Becky, so.
No, that was great. Thank you, both of you.
Do we have any other questions? I'll just jump in on that. I'm on the water's warm, I may as well. I was actually working for a bank and we actually had a couple of assessments come across. I was in the investment team, I was in the lending team. One of the lenders actually came to us and said, there's this business and we're not going to, we just will not, they're too big of a risk. And so we ended up
personally starting a company and actually creating an invested fund. And so we started investing in companies because they just were not going to get money anywhere else. And I'm talking 20 years ago, they weren't going to get money anywhere else. And those businesses are still going today. They were good investments. So yeah, and so I think it is persistence and finding a way, finding your people. And I would reiterate what Kathy's saying. It is long-term game as far as meeting people and getting your name out there.
I think we have to be very wary of self-fulfilling prophecies as well. With a lot of the women that I talk to that hear the statistics about the low level of capital that flows to female-founded businesses, they'll say, well, I can't access the money. And my first question to them is, what have you done? What have you done to access it? And they'll go, oh, nothing, it's too hard, right? So let's make sure that we don't have those self-fulfilling prophecies. It may not be easy, but it's somebody else's money. It's not supposed to be easy to get, right? It is a big responsibility to get. So don't be afraid to do the work. There are times where the work is very demoralizing when you're trying to do that, and I absolutely understand that. But also don't be afraid to look at those alternative sources of capital and not just put your proverbial eggs in one basket. It can be hard with government grants when they tie purchase to that, and you can't purchase the thing that you need to do the work to grow the business until you get the grant application. One way to consider it is if it drags out that long and that's material to the growth of your business, can I fund it a different way?
Or to lease it.
Or can I lease it? Can I do it somewhere else? What can I do? And we hear this a lot around when government gives out small bits of money. They can be that really necessary lifeline, but also carefully consider if your time is better spent getting another customer, right? Is it just better spent to get another? Can I get another customer that, or customers that generate that same amount of revenue? You might also apply for the grant in the background, but just make sure that you're putting your time and your energy. And when you write a grant, don't forget what you wrote. When the next one comes up, repurpose the information, be ready. You have to be ready when these things come out, the same way as when a board opportunity comes up. When Therese said, have you put your application in? No, it closes today. If you're of interest in that board space, have a CV ready. Have a board, style CV ready to go. You might have to tweak it, but don't let opportunities go by just because you weren't prepared for where those are. I'd like to maybe just go back to you for a minute, Miranda, to be able to explore some of the exciting things that are coming up in the Smart Precinct calendar, specifically around some of the professional development opportunities that you're looking to bring forward. If you'd like to share a bit of that.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a couple of really interesting opportunities coming up. Probably, I think one of the things that you spoke about earlier on in the evening was around, the significant challenges around from going from a startup to a scale. And Smart Precinct, having been a startup, has in itself is now in that trajectory of scale as well, in terms of we're now looking at programs that we can support businesses that are at that next level. So, Cassandra talked about, the companies that have gone through startup on ramps and the iActivates and the programs like that. What we're looking at pursuing as well as those programs is the next level of how can we elevate the businesses that we have supported and already out there to their next journey, and exciting partnership with the advisory board centre around that. So we are going to be running a couple of programs, including the technical foundations, advisory board foundations course, probably in February. So I think that there's some information going around for a register your expression of interest for that, but that will be super cool on a number of different levels. From a professional development perspective, as an individual, obviously you're going to be elevating your own capabilities in that governance framework. But for the business ecosystem in North Queensland as well, it provides a really exciting opportunity to activate those specialists in different areas to provide support in those industry advisory boards. And then that, of course, then for circular economy gives us the advisory board experience that people are looking for. So that's a really terrific opportunity. There might be some opportunities around also some funding with scholarships with different organisations, and also through the Female Founders Program with Advanced Queensland. So to keep an eye out for that. And then we will be increasing that program with the Certified Chair program as well. So that's a far more robust program around the certification, and really putting that credential on your CV for those board positions. So there are a couple of the things that we've got going on. Can I mention them right now? Or is that later?
You can mention it, but maybe also mention Australian Centre for Business Growth with Jana. She's got something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the wonderful Jana that spoke earlier on today, we do have some online programs for her Australian Centre for Business Growth program. Did it myself a couple of weeks ago. It was really enlightening. I think that even if you are experiencing business or you have done things in the past like that, you can always learn something. You've always got that little bit of gold takeaway that you can take and present into your business. So some really exciting programs around those business scales and business growth. We've got another program from Jane Arlett, Big Little Business. So lots of exciting things. And I think it's just a really powerful community to support businesses in North Queensland, especially now that we are working with the Council Business Development Centre. One of the reasons that brought me to Smart Precinct was actually because I just really see that as it's my responsibility for where I am in my career, and to elevate opportunities for my children and for the North Queensland region, to elevate jobs, elevate businesses, so that we're really are providing opportunities for substantial scalable businesses here in North Queensland, so people don't have to go outside of the region.
Yeah,
Kathy.
have to move to Brisbane, right, to get that, to get that opportunity.
But yeah, connect in with us. Lots of programs coming on.
Fantastic. Susan, do you mind just popping over to the next slide? Just as we wrap up, we wanted to have some time to do what we as women do best, which is to network and connect and share stories. But I just wanted to end on this really wonderful quote that came through from one of the research participants that we did, which really just said that we're on this cusp of an enormous trajectory. And there's never been a better time to be, I think, in business, even with the challenges of COVID. I think there's never been a better time to be in business, and there's certainly never been a better time to be a woman in business. And so I think that while we talk about the challenges, we have to recognize that this is an optimistic conversation. This is an opportunity-based conversation, and let's all lean into that opportunity, and let's all support each other and lift each other up in that opportunity. I'm a member of SheEO, if any of you have also heard of that, and what I think they do so well is they normalize the ask, right? If you need something, ask for it, right? Be really clear about what you need. I know going out in business often we can talk about it, people go, oh, I love what you're doing, it's so great, and you kind of go away and you go, that was a great meeting, but nothing happened, right? So be really clear about what you need and who you need it from. So I would encourage tonight, as you're connecting in and talking, or as we continue this conversation afterwards, if there's anything I can do, I share a similar philosophy to Jana, that I'm here to help, right? I might not be the right person to help, but I might be able to get you another link in the chain and one step closer. So I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm sure all of the other ladies would be very happy for you to connect in with them on LinkedIn. And if there's a question you have or something you need, ask tonight or ask later on. Right, when it comes up. The worst you'll hear is, I don't know, let me find out, right? Let me see if I can find somebody else to be able to do that. So I'd like to thank the panel, and I'd like to thank Smart Precinct and our other supporters for having us here tonight. And if you can give a bit of a round of applause. Drink.
Yeah, can I just say something quickly?
Yes, please.
How it was back in 2019.
I think so.
Yeah. The talking about, like how you said, giving it a go. There was 20 spaces available for the Advancing Women on Boards program that was to take place here in Townsville. I threw my name in the hat. As an Aboriginal woman, it's like I won't get anywhere. I got somewhere. And now from that experience, I serve on 4 boards here in Townsville. Quite strongly to continue building on our Indigenous women, our Aboriginal women, to put their hand in there and take that risk, because like you said, even though we have expertise, we also need cultural expertise from us, from that First Peoples perspective as well. So yeah, I've been quite disruptive in that area.
I love it. It's part of your success, Bernice. It's the joy of the work we get to do. Yeah, to be able to see. Thank you. Let's have a chat and some drinks.
Jen, sorry, just before you go. Sorry, I have to have the last word. I can't help it. We all know I like to talk about that. Look, on behalf of the Smart Precinct team, I think we would all agree that tonight has just been so incredibly enlightening, and we just feel so incredibly privileged to not only welcome such amazing speakers to join us this evening, the guests who are joining us across Australia on Zoom, but also yourselves that have started the conversation here today. As we said, we really want to encourage that conversation, but we also want to finish the night with just a small token of our appreciation to you all, and lovely Anna here has a small gift for you, and of course Lydia as well, our business and investment lead. So please join with me in thanking them once again for giving their time. And now I would just like to say goodbye to our guests who are joining us online, and also please ask that you eat the food so we don't have to. Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.